I remember the evening clearly enough. It was Saturday, August 12th, just past 9 o'clock, and the sky had begun to soften into deepening blue as twilight crept across the horizon. I was driving from my friend's cabin outside the town of Oak Ridge, somewhere 40 minutes out of the city, nestled among fir and pine heading back home. The road was a narrow 2-lane strip of blacktop winding through forest, wet from a brief summer shower that left the air smelling green and damp, heavy with pine resin and the faint sulfur hint of something unsettled. I had the windows partially down, wanting the cool dusk air, and the hum of the car's engine felt soothing in the darkening quiet. The first odd sign I noticed. There were deer crossing signs set at unusual intervals, 2 or 3 in the last few miles alone. I'd expected maybe 1 or 2 at the top of the mountain pass, but these signs felt abundant, as though someone was overcautious, and I passed only 1 deer during the drive. When the car's headlights picked up something at the edge of the forest, a flash of white fur darting between trees, I pressed the accelerator a little. Not out of panic, but simply wanting to get home. At about 20 miles from the cabin, the road curved sharply downhill. My headlights picked up a figure standing on the side of the road, a tall silhouette, motionless, facing the woods, not the road. I slowed the car instinctively, heart ticking faster than the engine at idle. The figure looked human, but the stance felt unnatural, as though the person stood too still. I told myself it was probably someone waiting for a ride, maybe drunk, maybe lost. I saw the figure raise an arm in a slow, deliberate wave backlit by trees and the fading light. I rolled down the window. "You okay?" I asked. Silence. I blinked, turned off the music. I watched the figure drop the arm, then without a step vanish behind the trees. I flicked my head toward the forest but saw nothing. I drove on, my throat dry. I reached a stretch of road under a canopy of old pines where branches nearly touched the car's roof. The car's headlights cast elongated shadows of trunk and branch on the wet asphalt. The smell of pine mingled with the metallic tang of rain. The radio crackled for a moment, then went silent, just static. I checked the display. No signal. I never lose signal in that region, or so I thought. I turned the radio back on silence. I turned the volume off, feeling uneasy. Ahead, the road narrowed further, trees closing in tightly. At the ridge, a sign said simply, "End of maintenance. Road narrows." I expected a safe, steady descent, but the slope seemed steeper, the darkness deeper. The wet road glowed faintly with reflection of the headlights, and I could almost hear water trickling off roadside rocks. I pressed the brakes lightly going down. Then I noticed prints on the wet asphalt, large shoe prints, as though someone had walked there recently. They led from the edge of the forest across the lane, then vanished into bushes. I stopped the car. The prints were fresh water still pooling around the edges crisp. My hands felt clammy. I told myself, probably a hiker or someone walking home. I stepped out into the rain-soft damp, flashlight from my phone directed at the prints. My breath came visible in the cool dusk air. I crouched, saw the prints were too large for me, with toes slightly splayed outward. I stood up quickly and got back in the car, locked the doors. The next curve came quicker than I expected. I braked hard and the car skidded a little on the wet surface. That's when I saw headlights coming up behind me, high beams glaring. The driver stayed far back. I watched in the rear view as the vehicle followed at slow speed, nowhere to pull over safely. My internal alarm rang. I checked the side mirror. The car couldn't pass. I accelerated a little to leave space. The headlights faded behind slightly, then stayed a constant distance. I felt adrenaline rising. My radio still silent. My phone screen glared in my lap. No signal. I tried to call my friend to tell them I'd be 5 minutes, but call wouldn't connect. I made peace with the idea it was just the road, the forest, Rain, but I couldn't shake that wave-shaped figure, the prints, the car behind. I turned off the main road into a narrower spur that led home, signposted private drive, authorized vehicles only. I hoped the other driver would keep going. The road into the drive was unlit, gravel, surrounded by trees. I slowed. The headlights behind me slowed too, and then floored it. I heard gravel spray, the engine rev. Then headlights flooded the trees and a horn honked once sharp close and cut through the night air. I panicked, slammed gear into reverse and backed onto the main road. The other vehicle didn't follow. I spun the wheel, tires squealing, and headed back down the hill, aiming for better lit stretch. I didn't dare look back. The radio came alive for an instant, a snippet of song, then back to static. A drop of water trickled down my face, though none of the windows were open. When I got to the lit highway, safe feeling returned somewhat. I glanced in the rear view. No car. My phone regained signal, the radio worked. I breathed deeply, told myself I'd imagined the horn, the prints, maybe the figure waving. But the memory of wet large footprints remained on that narrow-trimmed road where no one should walk. And the way the forest had seemed to lean inward. That night, I lay awake, hearing rain on the roof and leaves scratching outside the window. I thought I heard footsteps on the gravel drive, slow and deliberate. I flicked the light, nothing. I drifted in and out of sleep until dawn. The next morning I drove up to check the private drive. No prints, no sign of tires. The gravel looked undisturbed. The forest edge seemed still and asleep. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And the road? That stretch of road still gives me chills. I haven't driven it since. I don't know what followed me or who stood in the gloom. I don't know if it was someone, something, or a trick of the darkness. But sometimes at night, on a rainy drive in the woods, I think I might be parked by the side of the road, headlights off, watching you. The trip began innocently. It was Wednesday, October 3rd, around 11 p.m. I was returning from the city after working late at the office. My route took me through an old stretch of Highway 2 lanes. Hardly any traffic leading toward my house in the outskirts of Greenfield. That evening the air was crisp, a clear starless sky overhead, light mist rising from the asphalt, and the scent of damp earth wafted through the open window of my car. The gloom felt peaceful, almost lulling as I passed the first mile marker for the old timber road. The headlights illuminated something odd. A small wooden sign, half tilted. Watch for pedestrians. I blinked. Pedestrian signs are rare on this stretch. The lane behind me was empty, ahead no street lamps. I shrugged, thought perhaps there had been a walking path decades ago, and continued on. About 15 minutes and I pointed the car into a long straight that cut through fields and sparse trees. The mist thickened, glowing in my headlights, turning the beams into white curtains crossing the road. I slowed. The hush of the engine felt loud in the shell of the car. I noticed movement on the side of the road, a person, standing still, facing away. I slowed further. The figure wore what looked like a raincoat? Not sure, just a dark silhouette. I flicked the brights on. Briefly nothing changed. I watched as the figure slowly turned its head toward me, one twist of the neck, extremely slow. I forced myself to keep driving, but the figure stepped onto the road. I slammed brakes. The car's headlights flashed across the body. It paused center lane, then turned and walked into the mist off the road. I exhaled sharply, legs trembling. I sat for a moment, engine idling, eyes still locked on where the figure had gone. Then I moved forward slowly. The mist parted. I passed an area where the asphalt looked different, patches of road resurfacing or maybe just slick from dew. I noticed marks, tire scrapes across the road's edge and rubber shreds on the shoulder. My mind raced. Someone had lost control here before? The hair on my neck stood up. I told myself to keep calm, focus on the drive home. Then my radio crackled and went silent. The digital clock blinked 12 o'clock. The mist thickened, windshield wipers working hard though it wasn't raining. I felt claustrophobic. My phone buzzed. Text message. Take the detour. It was from my boss, I thought. I pulled over to check it carefully. The detour sign ahead told drivers to turn right onto County Road 8. I looked back to the highway and then the thick mist behind. For a second I thought I heard footsteps behind the car. I looked through the rear window. Nothing but mist. I ignored the message and continued straight. The detour lane branched right, narrow and ending at a locked gate. Lights off. I ignored it. Shortly after, the road pitched downward into a forested dip, trees on both sides, no streetlights. The road surface looked new in patches, old in others. My headlights illuminated a pair of white gloves lying on the shoulder. I didn't stop. My stomach churned. I accelerated through the dip, only half checking my speed. At the bottom, the mist parted and ahead the road forked. One route lit faintly by a distant street lamp and the other going deeper into the woods. I should have taken the lit one. For some reason, I turned into the woods. Mist closed behind like a curtain. The engine sounded off, somehow hollow. My phone lost signal. The radio static returned. My speedometer flickered. Then the road narrowed to single lane and I realized the trees were too close. Their branches scraped the roof. The smell changed. Damp earth turned to rotting leaves, old pine resin, something foul like dead wood and something decaying. My headlights picked up another figure ahead. This one walking along the center line, slow, very slow, head down. I slowed, heart thundering. I could only make out the outline of someone in a hoodie, maybe. I called out, "Hey! Do you need help?" No response. The figure stopped and looked up and then turned slowly to face me. I saw the eyes reflect the headlights, no expression. The figure raised one arm and pointed at me, then just like that it stepped to the shoulder and vanished into the forest. I felt icy breath on my neck. Suddenly I heard the engine rev oddly. The car jerked. I pumped the accelerator. The road opened ahead and I rushed into clear space back to an open lane under a street lamp. The mist thinned and I could see the highway ahead. I glanced at the rear view. The figure stood under the trees at the edge, watching. I didn't stop to look longer. I floored the car, tires whining. When I arrived home, my hands were shaking as I fumbled the keys. I locked the doors, sat on the sofa, and just stared at the TV until morning. I kept hearing whispers, quiet, almost inaudible, when the house was still. I checked the phone. The text said only 3 words: take the detour. Weeks later, I returned to the route in daylight. The watch for pedestrian sign looked old, rusted. I asked locals. No one walked there at night. No pedestrian path existed. The scuff marks and gloves were gone. The area under the street lamp? No figure, nothing. But sometimes, when I drive just after dusk, I swear I catch movement in the mist, and I feel the road beneath my tires is different than I remember. It was Monday morning, March 17th. I left my flat in suburban Riverton around 6:30 a.m. Already light but gray sky overhead, a cold wind ruffling my jacket. I took a lesser-used back road, the Maple Ridge Drive, because of a new coffee place I wanted to try. The road's edge was lined with maple trees, early buds just emerging, and occasional houses set deep in the woods. The smell of ground thawing under a mist hovered. The road seemed peaceful. As I drove, I noticed the speed limit sign was missing. Only the post remained. Ahead, an older wooden house looked abandoned, windows boarded, paint peeling. I passed slowly and glanced in the side mirror to see movement in the house's periphery. Someone leaning in the window, smiling? I told myself I'd imagined it. I sped up. By the time I'd finished coffee and was heading back around 7:45 a.m., the light was stronger. The mist around the trees was now just gray haze. I took the same road. Not far along, I saw fresh tire tracks off the road's shoulder-deep ruts and soft earth. I paused the car, stepped out, and saw the prints ran alongside the pavement, then stopped abruptly. I turned the phone flashlight on and looked toward the woods. Nothing but trees, old stumps, loose leaves. A branch snapped. I spun around. The car door locked itself. I frowned. The key was still in the ignition. I unlocked it and got back in. The next segment of the drive climbs a hill with little to no visibility around the bend until you crest it. I turned the wheel, crested the hill, and in the mirror saw a black SUV slowly following. At first I thought it was another commuter, but soon it turned its headlights off and seemed to drift behind. My heart sank. I sped up. The SUV maintained pace. I entered a straightaway and the SUV didn't pass. I took a small turn onto a service lane I knew cut through some fields, another short route home. The SUV followed the same turn. My pulse pounded. My phone buzzed with a single word, now. I looked at the number, unknown. I felt my skin crawl. I tried to call 911, but signal was weak. I looked ahead. The lane ended at a locked gate and a sign, danger, private property. I turned the wheel sharply and reversed, car tires skidding on the gravel. The SUV appeared directly behind me, headlights now roared on. I floored the pedal and veered off into a different sidetrack I remembered, a narrow dirt path, overgrown. The SUV didn't follow. I drove fast and erratically, branches hitting the sides, branches whipping across the windshield, glass smearing. I felt trapped. The track ended abruptly at a clearing. My car stalled. I jumped out and ran. The clearing echoed only my footsteps and the wind in the branches. I looked up, high clouds moving fast. In the distance I heard an engine rev and tires spinning. I ran toward the woods, tripped, landed on wet leaves. I regained my feet and scrambled until I found another path that led to a paved road. When I finally reached the main highway and glowed streetlights, I slowed and leaned my head back. The car door opened behind me. The SUV was parked maybe 100 yards behind, driver's side door open, but no driver in sight. My keys still in ignition. I locked the car, called for help. When cops arrived, SUV was gone. They found no prints in the field, no sign of disturbance, and no connection to me. They referred to abandoned vehicle call and left. I left the area, car driving fine after restart. Weeks later, I went back to that hill climb in the service lane. The tire tracks? Gone? The SUV? Never seen again. But I still feel that unease. Sometimes when I drive down quiet roads early morning, I imagine headlights behind me, a message blinking on my phone. Now. I don't know what it meant, who sent it. I don't know if I was being followed by someone or something. I just know I drive with constant glance in the mirror now. It happened on Thursday, September 22nd. About 10:15 p.m., I'd stayed late at the hospital where I work as a nurse in the small town of Westwood. The parking lot was mostly empty, the air heavy with pre-autumn chill. I got in my car, started the engine, and headed toward the highway that leads to my home in the countryside. The sky was deep indigo, no moon visible, street lights growing sparse as I left town. I could smell drizzle in the air, though none had fallen yet, the asphalt faintly slick under my tires. After about 20 minutes, I left the main highway and entered Hawthorne Lane, a scenic route that winds along an old creek and wooded hills. I enjoy that stretch because it's quiet, reflective. But this night it felt different. The neon glow of downtown fell away, and only the headlights carved shadows ahead. I noticed the map app sign warning, "Drive carefully, narrow road ahead." I kept the lights low so as not to blind the curves. Midway, I saw a small roadside shrine, a cross, a flickering lantern, a bunch of wilted flowers. I brake for a moment and read the memorial. Someone must have died there. The wind picked up and the lantern's flame flickered violently. The scent of wet wood and moss filled the air. I drove on, unsettled by how suddenly I came upon the shrine, and I hadn't noticed it before, though I drive this route regularly. Around 10:45, the road passes a narrow wooden bridge with railings. My headlights reflected off water below. As I crossed, the engine shuddered and the lights dimmed briefly, making the forest behind me appear as an inky mass. For a moment the car rolled, then regained itself. I exhaled. My heart hammered. I told myself technical glitch. I kept going. Just after the bridge, there's a turnout, a pull-off area with just room for one car overlooking the creek. I spotted a figure crouched by the water, wearing what looked like a pale jacket, hood up. I slowed and rolled the window down. I called out, "Do you need something?" The figure didn't respond. Its head stayed down. I clicked the interior light and it looked up. The face was pale white in my light, eyes black and hollow. I recoiled, slammed the window up, locked doors, and sped off. The radio crackled again as I pulled away. The jar of static scratched like nails. I glanced in the rear-view mirror. There was a car behind me, though I'd seen no one enter the turnout. Its taillights glowed softly. It followed at same distance for several miles. I glanced at the main mirror. I saw the figure from the creek standing on the road's shoulder inside the woods, just watching me. Then gone. As I descended into the final fields toward home, the road straightened and the gloom felt less oppressive. The second car turned off behind me onto a side lane, but as I passed a fence, I noticed fresh footprints in the misted grass beside the road-bare human solace, cold and damp. I slowed and switched on hazard lights. I stepped out, shone my phone torch toward the prints. They ended at the edge of the woods, my breath visible in the cool air. I slammed the car door and got back in. When I turned onto my own drive, the house lights were already on. My partner greeted me. I tried to tell them what had happened, but the words faltered. They looked skeptical, just nerves after a late shift. I stayed awake that night. Every creak and groan of the house, every rustle of leaves outside made me check the window. I couldn't sleep. The next morning I returned to the turnout and the creek bank with daylight. No footprints. The jacket the figure wore? Not there. The house at the roadside shrine seemed undisturbed. The memorial still flickered. The old bridge? No fault. It should have been normal. But I know I saw something. I know I was watched. Even now I hesitate when I drive that way. Sometimes I see a pale hooded figure at the side of the road, far ahead, standing still, staring until I pass. Then gone. I'll never forget the date, Sunday, April 4th. At 8:20 p.m. I was leaving the annual spring fair in my hometown, crowded, cheerful, with laughter and lights, but I opted to drive a back route home, through the Fox Hollow Road. This road was narrow, hedges tight, trees overhead forming almost a tunnel of branches. The air was warm but muggy, the smell of pollinating flowers from the fair still in my car, mingling with damp earth as I exited the town. At first, the drive was restful, the fair fades behind, the road quiet. I lowered the music and watched the dashboard clock as the rural lane stretched ahead. Then I passed a mid-road sign. Unstable shoulders, no stopping. It flickered in the headlights. I thought nothing of it. As I rounded a curve, I noticed the solid white line on the edge of the road had faded away, replaced by dirt. I drifted a little toward the center and corrected. I realized the road looked older than I remembered. The hedges overgrew the edges, and the smell changed from flower sweet to rich loam and damp wood. A little further on I saw the flashing taillights of a car ahead, slow-moving, slightly wobbling. I caught up. Its brake lights flickered. Then it turned off onto a narrow drive, leaving behind only its dark shape. I passed its turn and the road ahead plunged into darkness. My headlights barely reached the horizon. The hum of the engine seemed too loud. I glanced at the side mirror. No car behind, but I felt someone else there. Then I saw a person standing at the side of the road, silhouette lit by my headlights, arms spread wide as though signaling something. I froze. The road felt cold, though the air was warm. I braked, came to a stop. The person looked as though wearing a pale dress or coat, hair plastered or wet maybe. The figure didn't move except to raise its head and look directly at me. I couldn't tell the face. I got out of the car, something I thought silly, even as I did it, hands trembling. I clicked my phone's torch, but only got a fuzzy beam in the night. The figure turned and walked slowly away into the hedges. I got back in and locked the doors, heart pounding. I resumed driving carefully, my music off. The hedges closed in, branches scratching the doors. I squeezed the steering wheel. I came to a long straight, the black pavement glistening. The radio cracked and a voice whispered, "Don't turn around." I jumped. The volume was low but unmistakable. I switched the radio off. Who says "don't turn around" on a silent rural radio? Then the headlights behind me came on brights. I resisted the urge to throttle the accelerator. The lights followed for some minutes. I took a hidden turn I knew off the main lane onto a farm track with a gate and an old barn. I passed through quickly and onto a second dirt road. The headlights slowed and disappeared. I exhaled. I sped back onto the paved road, finally recognized a mile marker and gusset of streetlights. My phone buzzed again. You saw her. Unknown sender. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and looked forward. The hedges lining the next section were unusually tall, shadows stretched. Ahead I saw a car parked in the opposite lane facing me, no lights on. I thought, someone waiting. I slowed. The car door opened. No one stepped out. I swallowed. Then the car drove off, slow, crawling into the darkness. I reached home, safe. But later that night I dreamt of a pale figure standing in my driveway, illuminated by headlights, hair wet, the same. I woke to the sound of my doorbell. I peeked. Nothing. I looked out the window into the darkness. I thought I saw someone at the roadside, just standing in the hedges. I blinked, they gone. I went back to Fox Hollow Road in daylight. The unstable shoulders sign was gone. The hedges trimmed. There was no car parked. No sign. But I can't erase the memory. The voice on the radio. The message. The figure. The lights behind. And still I fear driving at night through narrow lanes where the shadows lean in and something watches. Because on Fox Hollow Road, I believe I didn't just drive home, I passed through something. Unseen.